Come on, I'll treat us to Sundays down on the pier. I know how much you like that." And just like that, she'd realized she was getting a consolation prize. She'd lost him, and there wasn't anything she could do about it except try to move on. Only, moving on didn't go quite as smoothly as she'd hoped. Caitlin had, of course, said yes to Tyler's proposal, and they wanted to get married right away. Parker had started packing immediately because she didn't want to be there for the big day, but Tyler convinced her to stay, saying he couldn't imagine getting married without her, and because she was a glutton for punishment, she stayed and watched him marry someone else. And left for home the very next day. Leaving Florida wasn't a big deal. Parker had been house-sitting for months and working odd jobs, so it wasn't like she had any big commitments. But figuring out where to go hadn't been easy, and she was beginning to notice a pattern. Okay, she didn't notice it per se, but when she told Tyler her plans, he didn't hesitate for a second to share that observation with her. Apparently, Parker was a runner. At 18, she ran from the only place she'd ever known and swore she'd never look back. It had always been her dream to travel, but because Tyler knew her so well, he pointed out how that was only an excuse. She ran from her family, both immediate and extended, because she never had the same ambition they all do and always felt like a slacker comparatively. She also ran from any real responsibility. The steady stream of house-sitting, dog-walking, and a dozen other little jobs that sustained her without any heavy commitment. She traveled, thanks to her inheritance from Pops, but rather than enriching her life, it simply gave her the excuse to keep avoiding being an adult. It would have been impossible to argue with him because he was completely correct. What he didn't realize and what she couldn't tell him was that he had been the only constant in her life. Tyler Burke, the person who she both clung to and took for granted, was the only person who ever kept her grounded. He was the one person who truly understood her and never passed judgment on her. Until now. That final conversation went downhill after he called her out on the way she was handling this whole situation. And, to add insult to injury, he told her he'd never had romantic feelings for her, and he felt that what she was claiming to feel for him wasn't real. His final words to her before he walked out of her life had hurt more than she ever imagined. "I've been nothing but a crutch for you, Parker. It's time for you to grow up and move on." Back in Magnolia, however, it was like she was back in school and never left. Once she had decided to sever all ties with her life in Florida, it just seemed logical to go home and figure things out. For years, she'd been flitting in and out of town, visiting her family on her own terms, but when she showed up unannounced, it didn't take long to realize how much everyone's lives had moved on without her. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. Right now, she was essentially homeless. She'd lasted all of 2 days with her parents, and for once, it wasn't her mother who made her want to leave. Her parents were doing major renovations on the house and leaving on a month-long cruise, so staying there wasn't an option. "Really, Parker, if you only bothered to call once in a while, you wouldn't be in this situation," her mother had harped. Oddly, it was almost comforting to get that bit of disapproval. Then, she stayed with her brother Mason and his wife, and that lasted another 2 days before she was asked to leave. It wasn't his fault. Apparently, Parker was a bit too much of a distraction for her young nephews, and her poor sister-in-law was pregnant again and feeling way too overwhelmed. "I still say I could have been a great help if they'd just let me spoil the boys for a little while," she whispered sadly. "We all would have calmed down eventually." The last stop was staying with her sister Peyton and her fiancé Ryder. Just thinking about the two of them gave her a massive headache. Two overachievers who were hell-bent on fixing her. Every minute of the 4 days she spent with them had been filled with them giving her suggestions and helpful hints for getting her life in order. It was like living with two over-caffeinated motivational speakers in her face from dawn till dusk. Exhausting.